Let's look at some examples now of my research that have taken place. So this first example was a study I did looking at how Twitter was used to influence positive drink driving behaviors on New Year's Eve across the English-speaking world. So essentially I was downloading data from Twitter using an API, an application programming interface, to see what people were saying about it. And this is very much a positivist approach, and it focused on quantitative analysis, more specifically ANOVA. And here is the conceptual model that I picked up on. Now, one of the things that if you're doing this sort of thing, you obviously need the literature review to support it. And then here, what I was trying to identify was the concept of engagement. What type of message, tweet, has the biggest engagement? And the engagement was made up of retweets, favorites or likes, and replies. And you'll notice that the replies is in a dashed line, because that's because actually once I did research, I found that for this particular question about don't drink and drive, there were not many replies at all. So actually I took that line out. Now, the literature review I did identified the first two elements of linked to engagement. So the tweet type, images and videos were meant to have more engagement than just normal text. So I was testing that, and hashtags were meant to have more engagement than normal tweets. Now, remember earlier on I talked about usually social listening becomes a sort of mixed methods. Well, I had an exploratory element to this as well, because when I downloaded the data, I discovered that there was this functional value and emotional value linked to it as well. And that was through the thematic review of the data in that. And what I mean by functional value was that what I discovered is that there were certain people who were tweeting, like saying, right, on New Year's Eve, I've got a discount code for Uber, or you can get a lift from here, or there's free public transport. So that's how I classed as emotional value. And the emotional value, I picked out a lot of the engagement was around something that had been linked to an accident or a crash or a loss of life. So I put that in there. All of this had to be controlled with a covariate, which is the followers, because hopefully you'll agree that engagement probably would be much higher if you have more followers. So I needed to control that. So I had this this model here, which you can pick up, or if you want a copy of the paper, just drop me a line and I'll send it to you. And it shows you the study had an element of confirmatory analysis and exploratory analysis within the process. So it's very much an iterative aspect. Now, the API was linked to two platforms. There is Social Bearing, and do have a look at this. This is free, which you can use on a Mac or a Windows platform, or there's NodeXL. Let's look at these individually now. So Social Bearing, and just type in through Google or your favorite search engine, Social Bearing, and you'll find it. And you can essentially just type in a keyword or a place or people, and you will get information back. Now, one of the downsides of this free type of platform is that it gives you information in chunks of 100. So you have to almost sit there and re-download, so you'll get chunks of 100 every time to look at it. But do have a look at that, and you'll see what I mean. Another alternative, which only works if you've got a Windows platform, there isn't a version for Mac users, is NodeXL. Now, this is a plugin for Excel where there's a built-in API which you can download the data. So here you can almost download it, and in some instances, on some of the big terms, I would put in my keywords, and it would be a few hours before the download happens, because earlier on I talked about 100 chunks, there is a chunk in here. So it will download a lot of data, and then it will stop and wait for a little while, but it does that automatically, and then you'll get all the data in which you can analyze. So what we can see here is that the key aspect to all of this is identifying your keywords, and most of this is again done through an explorative process. Like for the don't drink and drive, that was my initial thought, don't drink and drive, and then I had the hashtag don't drink and drive. But when I started downloading the data, what I identified was that designated driver was a key term that's been used, drive sober, arrive alive. So I included those in, and I started the process of downloading the data. One of the actually, just sticking with the keywords, another important thing to consider is don't choose keywords which have lots of data. You know, if you were to try and do a piece of research on Trump or Nike or Apple, you will get just so much data that it will become really, really hard to do any clear analysis. So my advice is that when you're embarking on research, like look at what we call the long tail terms that are not quite as common, and that will make the research a little bit more interesting. Now, after you've decided on your keywords, you need to think about your time frame. So my time frame here was just 24 hours, but because it was a global aspect to it, I've extended it out because I was trying to get a complete spectrum. And what I mean by that, I wanted to pick out what was being said in New Zealand on New Year's Eve, as well as Honolulu in Hawaii. So I would get a whole range of items. So you can see the tweets that were happening before, and then the retweets, the tweet in the time frame that I've got, and the mentions in there. And what you would be doing when you get this is that you would focus specifically on the tweets, because the retweets are the same data. So you don't want to, and they tend to be more. We'll see that in a minute. They tend to be more pieces of information. So you focus on the retweets. When I show you the numbers in a minute, it'll make a little bit more sense. So you can see here why after that you start to go into this iterative process of exploratory and then confirmatory. Maybe exploratory, and then your confirmatory. So I've got all this data, and then I did my MANCOVA to do the quantitative analysis. So you can see here the results. So within that 24-hour period, I had a total of 70,000 lines of data. Actually, when I downloaded the data, it was close to 150,000, and that's because I was downloaded in keyword chunks, but a lot of the downloads that I did would have duplicates, so you need a process of removing the duplicates. And you can see also in the top, within the 24-hour, 93% of the output was retweets, and really it was focusing in on the unique lines, which were the tweets, and you can see there only 1% were the replies. And you get an idea of the quantities of items in there. And this is where you get your data. You're counting the items up. Now, I talked about all this information. So even 4,500 lines of data, that's a lot of data to do some sort of thematic analysis. So there are ways of categorizing data using machine learning or algorithms, and this is a simple if you like, algorithm or formula in Excel that can be used. So it's actually looking at a piece of text. So the text is in column B, as you can see, that green arrow line. That's all the text. So that's my 4,500, 5,000 lines of data. And having done a little bit of research, I picked up the two keywords that I've identified, and I've only done a small bit here. You probably find it a little bit difficult to see on there, but essentially the keyword within the functional list was free or user code, and then in the emotional list was killed, crash, hospital, and the formula would go through, and then I could pick out the words within there. So I could say, right, that's a that tweet was a functional tweet, that tweet was an emotional tweet, or it was nothing. And that's how I got the count. So you can very quickly analyze vast quantities of data with simple formulas in Excel. I'm going to show you something a little bit more sophisticated in a few minutes. And then finally, I came up with the MANCOVA results. And you can see here the two which I've underlined in red. The hashtags were not important. Most people were just using "don't drink and drive." They didn't feel the need to do hashtag "don't drink and drive" because it's the same. Whereas, if we were tweeting about today's conference, rather than using emerging trends in marketing and management, most people, like I did today, would be hashtag ETIMM, and people would pick it up that way. You can pick up segments. Now, you could also look at the users to try and identify what groups they're in, because it's quite difficult. So I looked at the social marketing bodies, and we'll see who they are in a second. But in the Twitter handle, I would identify if it was a police department, a trooper, whatever, and that's how I managed to pick up these categories within there. The social marketing agencies, I actually went back, and also the alcoholic companies, to look specifically at what they tweeted. And in this instance, only the US Road Traffic Authority had done any tweets on New Year's Eve, which is a little bit surprising. From this breakdown into segments, you can do some really innovative social network analysis. So this is an example of the social network analysis that was presented from the study here. Now, the top left-hand graph is essentially all the data that's taken place. The top right-hand is pared down to give a little bit more of a user-friendly output, and then the bottom left and bottom right are those looking at the functional value and the emotional value. Let's look at this in a little bit more detail now. This is the top right-hand example. So what we've got here is the tweets that have been presented using Gephi. So Gephi is a social network analysis platform, and you could do the same thing in NodeXL, and I'll touch on that a little bit later. And the colors show where the main tweets have come from. So society in general were the ones that were tweeting the most. So you can see a very big purpley output here, and the sort of like the big mushrooms in between are where most of the tweets have taken place. And all the little dots on the outside are those people who have tweeted "don't drink and drive" and nobody has responded to. So you can see there's a lot of engagement in there, but there are elements otherwise associated with it. And then or just under 1.5% are government agencies. So these were like state troopers or police departments or fire brigades tweeting out messages saying "don't drink and drive." So you can see a much smaller number in there, so you can see the red elements, but none of the social marketing bodies, so these are the people responsible for managing the drink driving campaigns, they didn't do anything over New Year's Eve. So there was less than 1% out there. That was the American example. So you can see here, you can start to pick up a different aspect of research, social network analysis, which is really really interesting. So that's one example. Here's another example I want to touch on, which I actually did with my students, and it shows you how quickly we did. We did it in class during an exercise. We were looking at the conversations in relation to the proposed new Super League that you may have come across earlier on this year. You had the 12 big players saying that they were going to break away from all the countries' football societies and create their own. So we did a quick review and just looked at the data using the keywords, or the three keywords: European Super League, and Super Space League. There were just under 14,000 tweets, generating just under 10,000 likes and over 1.5 million retweets. And the overwhelming sentiment that we picked up, and that's another thing you can do with sentiment analysis, was one of anger or sadness. And the one tweet that generated the most, now again, strictly speaking, I should rewrite this, but I've, for the purposes of this, put it in the same, is that kids grow up dreaming to win the World Cup and the Champions League, not any Super League. The enjoyment of big games is that they only happen once or twice a year, not every week. Really hard to understand for all football fans out there. So it gets an idea of what's happening. Now, earlier on I showed you an example of Gephi and the way they do it. Now, NodeXL, the output, can put it into group in a box, so graph in a box here. You can see the various segments. So these are color-coded into big segments. So you can see the top left-hand corner, the big group there. That's a conversation about a specific aspect of the European Super League, and you see it coming down smaller. So by using this platform, you can very quickly analyze the different groups. Why is that group the most popular? You know, what is it about that? And you can do some studies around that. So very quickly you can get data out, which is interesting to review. Now I've showed you two examples with Twitter. So is it just Twitter that you can use? The answer is no. Last year I presented a paper using a summative content analysis approach using the forum Mumsnet, and here's some other researches. So at the moment I'm doing some research through Keyhole. So earlier on, when we looked at the data or the suppliers out there, Keyhole was one of them, and the annual license of this is only about 1,200. So you might need a budget or some sort of funding to do this. And my research here is very much looking at diabetes structured education. So I've got 5 of the UK's, or four of the UK's big players, and I've got different aspects in here. Daphne, Expert, Desmond, they all provide diabetes research, and you can see on there the platforms that it utilizes. So there's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube that I can get data on. And then you can put your keywords in there, and that's not only getting through Facebook, Instagram, but it's also picking up RSS feeds and other news outlet websites. So you're getting a lot more information. Now, when you use platforms like this, industries or commercial organizations would like to see dashboards. So here we've got the dashboard of data showing that we've got 5,000 tweets that have taken place, just under 2,500 likes, 12,000 engagements. So there's a lot of information there, but from a research point of view, actually, what do I do with that? We'll just look at a little bit more at some of the data that it can produce. So you can pick up related topics, top websites, the sentiment, where the location's coming from, the gender, the device type. But from me as a researcher, this is nothing, because essentially it's a black box, and the data's out there, and I can't really do anything with it. But the great thing about this, and if I just go back to the top bit here, you can see right at the top I can download the data in an Excel format. So that's just by the orange button near the top right hand corner. You might find it difficult to see, but actually you can download that data, and this is what you would get. So I've got just under 1,000 lines of information from over a month, which I can start to go in and review. So I've got the raw data in which to analyze. And in this instance here, most of the outputs were from Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So these charities, medical education departments, don't really use things like TikTok or YouTube, so they haven't really done anything, or within the time that I've been looking at. But I can start to look at the posts, and the amount of information here is manageable to review. Sometimes when if you were to do something like Trump or whatever, you'd be getting millions of lines of data, and it's really hard to analyze. Now, earlier on, I talked about using algorithms within Excel. There are actually other ways which you can do it. Sadly, we don't have too much time to go in a lot of detail, but I want to share with you one of these. So you can do image or text machine learning through a variety of platforms, and one here which you may want to have a look at is monkeylearn.com. Topic modeling, LDA, using Python. Some of you may have done that, and graph databases using Neo4j. Great tools to support the analysis of social listening. Now, I want to share with you, just as a final aspect, this machine learning algorithms that are out there, and this is through MonkeyLearn, and I'll start off with an example. So I've got some texts from the Bible, Corinthians 13, which has got 274 words within here. So you can see at the top there, if I speak in tongues of men or of angels, blah, blah, blah. It's all about love, this. So 274 words, and you'll be doing research which will have a lot more lines within that. Now I've copied and pasted that and put this into, this is just the example, it's not the proper output from MonkeyLearn, but if you go onto their site, you can see this. I've copied and pasted and put it in that text on the left hand side, the extracted text, put it in there. So you can see there, test your own text, and I've typed it in. If I speak in tongues of men or of angels, that's the word I put in there. It's immediately extracted the keywords from that 274 lines of data, and you've got love, you've got child, you've got part, you've got tongues, you've got knowledge. So if we go back and look at the words, there were 9 words related to love, and I've highlighted them all here. Then there were 5 words related to child, which I've highlighted here, so it's picked those up. Then 4 words related to part. Now, you're sort of limited within MonkeyLearn, but if I was using topic modeling, the LDA process within here, you can do excluded words. So I might, in this instance, think actually part's not really an important word to use, so I would exclude that. So it would take that out. So you can have exclusions. In most cases, things like is, I, a, because there's lots more of those, they would be excluded because otherwise they would dominate the output. And then finally, you got the 2 words, tongues, and then 2 words here of knowledge. So you can see you can put in lots of words into these machine learning or algorithm type platforms that will give you knowledge. And similar sort of things can happen with images. So you would put in your URLs, so you don't actually have to put the image in, you put the URL link to the image, and the platform will analyze it and it'll give you, right, these images are based on this, it's made out of this, boy, summer, beach, seaside, whatever, and then you can analyze that yourself, maybe using NVivo or some other method. And that's just a quick summary. You can see there what we picked out. So love, 9 words, child, 5 words, part, 4 words, etc., etc. So that's me sort of like coming to the end of this presentation now. But finally, just some quick points to consider. So I've gone through all of this aspect of listening. In life we use our ears and our eyes to listen. So eyes is still important. What can we do in social listening? It's all about these APIs, capturing of data from your chosen platform or platforms. My advice really is to focus on one platform until you start to become more experienced in this, when you can start to bring in more platforms to consider. Again, in life we use our minds to process data, to construct meaning. What can we do in social listening? Well, we still use our minds. We are researchers. Our minds are the most important things for us. But as I just recently showed, the machine learning platforms or even simple algorithms that you can put into Excel can help you construct meaning from from the data. And then finally, then how do we respond to the myriads? Well, here essentially you are producing your reports, but if you are in business, you are either creating a strategy or new tactics or responding to your customer or potential customer. So overall summary, hopefully you agree that social listening is a very useful methodology for researchers, and hopefully some of you may touch on that. Now, so I hope you have found that interesting. It just leaves me to say thank you, and any questions?